The Puck Portfolio with Andy McNeil.
Hey, welcome to the Puck Portfolio. It is Friday, October 25th. We've got a 4-game slate to break down on today's show. I'm your host, Andy McNeil, and with me, as per usual, Nick Martin from the Action Network's Line Change Hockey Podcast. Nick, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm excited. We got a good slate here, so should be
Not a
fun
bad slate. We don't usually have bets to talk about on every game on a 4-game slate, but I think we do today on Friday, and we'll have some Saturday bets to look forward to as well. Nick, how'd your night go? Mine was not a profitable night. I ended up going 2-3 with the Carolina Hurricanes and the Dallas Stars coming through for me on the money line. Unfortunately, the Kraken did not get the job done against the Winnipeg Jets. And I made a bet on the New Jersey Devils before that line got way out of hand after the news that both Luke Hughes and Brett Pesce would be returning to the lineup on Thursday, and yeah, that one went by the wayside pretty quick. The Devils tried to fight back, but eventually lost 5-3 to the New York Islanders. And then, of course, I did have a player prop that's kind of escaping me right now. I had the over 6 in the Minnesota Wild, over 6.5 actually in the Minnesota Wild game. So depending on what you played, over 6 minus 120 or over 6.5 even money, it was either a push or a loss. I was kind of hoping that one would get there too. It was 2-2 after the second period.
Yeah, that's a tough O2 for
was
sure.
looking for that goal to tie it up from the Lightning. But Marc-Andre Fleury was strong enough. But yeah, let's get into I don't know, Nick, what do you think? Do you think I was looking at the odds here for tomorrow, and I know we both have our eye on one team in particular. You know what? We'll save it based on what I'm seeing at some. You know what? Actually, let's not save it. Let's get into it right now. Let's look
Okay.
ahead because we've got Pinnacle Sports opening up at plus 146. A lot of other books around plus 140, plus 135. North Star Bets though, Bet Rivers, North Star Bets in Canada is plus 148 on the Washington Capitals for Saturday. And I thought we'd just get this one out of the way because I want to lock that one in right now. Like I said, I like them pretty much down to plus 135. I think the Lightning should be around a minus 124 favorite in this one. Pretty big number for a team that's been playing as good as the Washington Capitals have been, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was last Saturday the Caps were plus 150 in New Jersey. So it seems crazy to me to think that they're still this good of a number with what they've shown this week. And they've been good to us on here. They've been not letting me down at all. So I'm pretty high on them. And, that Carberry number keeps coming down. And I just think you look at it like they have some legitimate depth advantages down the lineup in this matchup. Obviously, they need them because they don't have anything close to the stars the Lightning have. But you look at it like they're clearly a pretty inspired group. They look really organized. Love the blue line. Entering the year, that was one of the reasons I thought they were being underrated. And I think the blue line really has looked like the strength that it was supposed to be. So, maybe in time it's going to be tough to keep winning games without getting superstar type performances from anyone the way that, their opponent Tampa Bay here will. But yeah, I'm right with you. That's just a pretty good number to take on given the way they're getting pretty strong play from all over the lineup. I think even that second line, it's not the line of Pierre-Luc Dubois, Connor McMichael. They've not been the most productive, at least prior to the Philly games, but I was pointing out how they were faring reasonably well taking on the opposing team's top units, and that's something the Caps really need because they're never going to have Kucherovs and guys like that, but if they can have a line that's close to an eraser and kind of can play even in minutes with units like that, it's just going to help them so much because I think they can win a lot of the depth battles. So yeah, I like this bet for sure.
Yeah, so Capitals plus 148. We like it down to plus 135. Are you in agreement with that one, Nick?
Yeah, honestly, I think probably
even lower,
even plus 130. I think I'd still be going with it. I feel pretty reasonable, pretty confident that it'll be a close game and they can at least give us a good shot at that kind of a price.
Yeah, so the Lightning right now, according to Evolving Hockey at 5-on-5, they have a 53% expected goal share. That is the 10th best in the NHL right now. But the Capitals up there in the 6th spot, sitting at 56% roughly. And Washington has scored more goals per 60 than the Lightning, which, not many teams have had. The Lightning are ranked sixth offensively right now, 5-on-5. The Capitals scoring 3.97 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 right now. Doubt that they're going to score at that rate all season, but it's pretty encouraging. And also, they're allowing just 2.44 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes against the Lightning, who are right around there at 2.5. So, offensively, defensively, the Capitals are at least on par with the Lightning, it looks like right now. And I think, just on that fact alone, this is a pretty generous line to be giving out on the Washington Capitals for Saturday. But we'll touch on more of Saturday's games a little later. Just wanted to kind of touch on that one a little bit off the hop here, because things could move fairly quickly. So that's the Capitals at plus 148 down to plus 135, plus 130. We still think it's good at those odds. But moving on, we'll talk about the 4 games that we have on Friday. We've got the Senators at the Golden Knights, the Islanders at the Devils, the Predators at the Blackhawks, and the Penguins at the Oilers. Let's start with the Senators and Golden Knights, because I like Vegas here. I bet Vegas minus 130 on the money line. Of course, all signs kind of pointing to Linus Ullmark making his return to the crease for the Senators, although nothing has been confirmed at this time, or at least it hadn't been, prior to the start of this show. But yeah, Vegas obviously bounced back after that 3-game losing streak on the road with a home win, 6-1 over the Los Angeles Kings. The Senators, they're aiming to pick up another road win after shutting out the Utah Hockey Club on Tuesday by a score of 4-0. I like Vegas here. I mean, like I said, Ullmark probably making his return to the Senators crease after they reassigned their AHL goalie down to Belleville. And sportsbooks, they've been adjusting their odds on this game throughout the morning. Vegas originally opened as a minus 155 money line favorite, came down into the minus 130 range, and that's where I made the bet. The Ottawa Senators, I think they're struggling at 5-on-5. Honestly, they rank 27th in goals per 60 minutes. And their expected goals are slightly better than Vegas. Ottawa's a team, we talked about this before the season. They're a team that has underperformed expected goals year in, year out. So I don't think this is necessarily a shock to see them doing it again. And Vegas, they haven't been as good defensively this year as they were last year. But I think they're poised for a bit of an offensive boost here as well. With Shea Theodore expected to return to the lineup tonight, and Jonathan Marchessault, or not Jonathan Marchessault, so William Karlsson, one of the other misfits, getting the misfits mixed up. William Karlsson expected to make his season debut as well. So I like Vegas at minus 130. I'm just going to check out kind of where they're at right now. I know you've kind of come down a little bit on the Vegas Golden Knights since the start of the season, Nick, but how do you view this game?
Yeah, I mean, they showed me the other night when we were in disagreement when they stomped the Kings.
Yeah.
But I think you probably know that I actually kind of like the Sens here, just given how high I've been on them this year. And so far, I don't think they've let me down once. I think they've actually won every bet. And I feel like they look pretty good at 4-2. I love the offensive upside of their top 3 units right now. I think they can have a really good power play. So I think this is the one out of the 2 days that we disagreed on. So that's not too bad. And that's going to happen. But yeah,
You're on the Sens officially, or
yeah,
you're
there's
right.
plus 120s out there still. So I would be playing small on the Senators at that.
Gotcha. Well, I don't like it, but good luck. May the best man win. But I know you do have a bet on the Islanders and the Devils games, or a couple of bets maybe, or just a player prop. Of course, the Devils losing in Detroit last night, pretty frustrating loss. We were talking a bit about before the show about Jacob Markstrom, and how I was a little bit hesitant to say, like, yeah, Markstrom's going to be the saving grace for the Devils. He's going to turn them around instantly. Because he was great in Calgary, but he was not outstanding prior to that in Vancouver and whatnot. So I mean, I don't think it was as a sure thing as people were making it out to be. But I kind of, I guess, talked myself into it. Now I wish I had been a little more bullish on Jacob Markstrom, maybe taking a little bit of time to fit in with a new club here because he hasn't had a great start, and then neither have the Devils. I think the Devils, coming into the season as the Metro Division favorites at a lot of sports books, winning those first two games over in Prague. I think the hype was pretty high at that point, and they've had a pretty underwhelming start, especially when you consider the Rangers have been so good and the Capitals have been off to such a hot start. Even like the Penguins have been terrible, and they're not even that far behind the Devils in the standings right now. So New Jersey got to get it together. Do you think they'll get it together tonight versus the New York Islanders?
I lean towards them, but that's not what I'm backing here. And
No?
It does feel like, I was really high on the Devils, and I think that their
Yeah.
play this week has obviously been concerning. You could see two of the breakdowns last night were pretty ugly, but I still think it's pretty fair to say that that's just a game they should have won, and the goaltending mismatch was significant. And I'm right with you. Like, I just thought Markstrom needed to provide league average goaltending. I wasn't sure he'd be as good as he was last year in Calgary because we don't see that many goalies year after year dominate like that. And he had been fairly up and down. So I do agree that it was a lot less of a lock that he would be that good. I just thought all the Devils needed was, league average goaltending. And now it looks like, and even Jake Allen had a bad start the other night.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly you're not feeling so great. And I do think at times they're not a fun team to play behind. Like, they have some of these really ugly breakdowns where it's just like they try a lot with the puck. They're really trying to transition aggressively. And I feel like sometimes when they have breakdowns, it's in bad areas and it's quick turnovers leading to like really tough chances. So I don't think any goalie's padding their stats playing behind them. But the prop I like on this game, which is I think Jack Hughes obviously stood out a ton last night, and he was really just dominating the wings all over the ice. And we've seen these runs from him where he gets in that kind of a
Until
rhythm.
Michael Rasmussen
I know,
put him
and
on
I
his ass.
pointed that out in my article too, because it was funny. Like, he embarrassed them probably for 59 minutes, and then it ended like that, and it's just a tough look for him and the Devils. But we've seen these kind of runs from him before, where he just gets in a rhythm and he just stands out so much. The puck's on his stick the whole game, and he's just pouring chances on the net.
8 shots last night.
Yeah, and I was surprised when I looked at the line today that it was -113 for him to get 4 shots after that kind of performance, because that's still a better night than it was last night. Obviously, a big part of that is that the Red Wings are just giving up so many shots to everyone, and the Islanders have given up the least shots in the league. But I think you'd probably agree you don't project the Isles to be that good defensively. And the one thing that I noticed out of the Islanders' schedule, they have played teams that are averaging 25th in the league in terms of shots on goal this season. So they've played a schedule that's just completely made up of teams that aren't getting shots in all matchups. And I think that's kind of, made it look like they're more of a defensive juggernaut than they're going to be. So for that reason, I think it's a pretty good spot to go back to Hughes here, because, you'd think on a normal day, if anything, the number would have been at least what it was last night after that kind of a performance. And I thought that would be like a really trendy bet. So yeah, I'm happy to do that because I'm not sold that this is actually a bad matchup for him at all.
Yeah, like looking at this season, the last 2 games he's played, he's had 6 and 8 shots respectively. 3 in 3 straight before that. It took him a few games. It took him 5 games before he had 3 shots in a game. So a bit of a slow start for Hughes. But if you look at last year, this is a guy who registered 4 shots in 60% of his games last season. I think there was only 25 out of 62 games that he didn't have at least 4 shots on goal. So yeah, this is a guy that typically gets to that mark.
He was getting 4.5 lined at even money, like for some
like a
games,
McKinnon Pasternak type of player, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. So I'm happy with that. And I do think there's a lot of game scripts, even though this hasn't been the way the Isles have gone yet. I do think we're going to see a lot of these Devil scripts where they're just like 40 shots and it's a 1-goal game. And I wouldn't discount that happening tonight. So I think it's a pretty solid spot to back Hughes.
Yeah, I like it. And then we've got a big game between the Predators and Blackhawks. Obviously, a little more important for the Predators than you probably would have expected this one to be a few weeks ago. But given their troubling start, they've got to start racking up some wins here, and probably a good chance to do so against Chicago on Friday. But you like Bedard to pot one tonight, do you?
I do, and it's a little contradictory because I actually don't mind the price to bet the Preds at all in this game. But you look at where Bedard's number to scores tonight. He was out there when I did my article this morning at plus 240. He's still
Nice.
at exactly that on Sports Interaction. So I just think that's a good time to buy low on Bedard. He's only got 2 goals in 20 games, I think was the number. It's 3 and 20 or 2 and 20. So that obviously suggests it's a horrible bet. But a deeper dive, like this number's so far off where he's been most of his career. The Preds this year have averaged like 4.5 goals against per game. Even last season, they were a middle of the pack team in terms of goals against, or slightly upper middle of the pack. So it's not like it's a horrible matchup. And like his line, I still think with Teravainen, he's obviously in tough. Teams can really just square in on him, but I still think he's playing on a more talented offensive unit than last year. Their underlying goal share is respectable. He's averaging 3.2 shots on goal over those 20 games. He's shot just 3%. So I think anyone who's paid any attention to Bedard as he's come up the ranks knows that he's not the kind of guy you want to bet on shooting 3% for that long of a sample.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's due to start getting, start filling the net a lot more than we've seen so far. I don't think we'll see numbers like plus 240 for too long. So I'm kind of happy to bite on that. Well, he's clear, like that's just clearly so far below where he's going to be for
Yeah,
most of his career.
just 1 goal in 7 games, 7 points though. He's a point per game player. So right now he is living up to that, I guess, 82.5 point projection that the sports books kind of had him in that range anyway prior to the start of the season. So he's on pace to be a point a game player. But yeah, 4% shooting right now compared to 10.7% last season. So yeah, a player of his ilk is not going to shoot under 5% for very long. He's going to
And,
be back
and
up there in no time.
I think he's looked pretty good. I think that's kind of been the
Oh yeah.
general take around the Hawks is that he's looked good. I think the thing that's been disappointing is, people probably thought they were going to get a little more from some of these other guys and that the team might pop a little more offensively away from Bedard, but I'm not really too worried that I mean, like you said, he has 7 points. So it's not like this that much of a talking point, but just in terms of the goals, I feel like that's a good time to buy in and look for him to start bouncing back on that front.
Yeah, for sure. And a big marquee matchup tonight. Uh, I guess headlining this small slate is the Pittsburgh Penguins in Edmonton to take on the Oilers, and both clubs struggling right now. Um, Edmonton is coming off 2 consecutive losses, a 4-1 defeat to the Dallas Stars on Tuesday, a 3-2 overtime loss against the Carolina Hurricanes at home on Thursday, after blowing a 2-goal lead at that. And then you've got Pittsburgh. They're on a 3-game losing streak with defeats against Carolina, Winnipeg, and Calgary. And so far, their only wins this season have been against Detroit, Montreal, and Buffalo. Yeah, since the 2019-20 season, Edmonton has absolutely dominated the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, going 7-1, including 6 straight wins. And in those 6 victories, Edmonton has outscored Pittsburgh by an average of 5.5 to 1.5, with each win coming by a margin of at least 3 goals. So yeah, I mean, pretty good, sign for the Oilers tonight that they might be able to get back in the win column. But I'm certainly not laying a big price on this team, given what we've seen so far. I don't think, I think they're going to turn it around. I mean, we all suspected their defense and their goaltending to maybe be a bit suspect this season, even though they were the Stanley Cup favorite. I think we thought they would, still be one of the contenders, even with some suspect defense and goaltending. So that's why I think the most shocking thing about this team's start this year is that they've scored 2 or fewer goals in all but 2 games so far. So that's, I think, the thing that you can kind of bank on that not staying that way for very much longer. I mean, according to Evolving Hockey, this is the 4th best offensive team in the league at even strength when you're talking about expected goal generation. Like I said, defense a little suspect. They're ranking, I think, 17th right now in even strength expected goals against. So that has to improve. But yeah, I don't think this is going to continue much longer for Edmonton. That said, the Penguins, they're scoring at an above average rate right now. I think they've underperformed expected goals by quite a bit, though. And it's good that they're getting goals from guys like Rickard Rakell, Lars Eller, Kevin Hayes, Drew O'Connor, but they need to have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin really going here in order to be, a real threat on most nights. And Malkin started hot, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points in his first 6 games, sorry, but he hasn't produced a point in his last 3 games. And Sidney Crosby has just 1 goal in 8 games after scoring 30 plus in pretty much every full season he's ever played. He put up 44 last year. And he hasn't had a whole lot of success against the Edmonton Oilers either. He's got just 3 goals in 15 games against the Oilers since McDavid was drafted in 2015-16. So I think it's a pretty interesting matchup. Obviously, both of these clubs needing a win. But the bet that I'm going with, as tempting as Jeff Skinner over 2.5 goals is, even at -50, it's still pretty tempting because the Penguins have been bleeding shots. They rank, I believe, only 6 teams have allowed more shots per 60 minutes than the Penguins have in all situations. And Skinner has registered 3 or more shots in 6 out of 7 games this season, including the last 5 in a row. But there's been a big adjustment. I mean, we got plus 135 on Skinner to go over 2.5 shots against Carolina. Now he's minus 150 against Pittsburgh, and rightfully so. I mean, I kind of had this in mind heading into the season. This is a volume shooter, but you know who else has been a volume shooter this season? Matthias Ekholm, and I think he's a really good bet to go over 2.5 shots against the Penguins on Friday. You can get him at plus 120, plus 125, over 2.5 shots. I mean, everybody looks at Evan Bouchard when you think of, you know, the Edmonton blue liner that's going to be shooting the puck the most. But so far this season, Matthias Ekholm has been shooting the puck more than Bouchard. And, you know, even if you look at last year on a per 60-minute basis, Ekholm's shot production was pretty in line with Bouchard's. So I like where he's at heading into this game. He's hit the mark, I believe, in 4 out of 7 games overall. I could be mistaken about that because I've seemed to have misplaced my notes. But yeah, I'm going with Matthias Ekholm to get over 2.5 shots against the Penguins at plus 125. Do you have anything you like in this game between the Penguins and the Oilers, Nick?
Yeah, I do. And you know, you talk about the Oilers. This season feels so close to last year. The record's a little better, but like it feels like almost the same thing as when Woodcroft got released and they brought in Knobloch. And I think people like us were like, wow, this is gonna be such a good situation for Knobloch because this team is so due for positive regression everywhere. And I think their last 2 games have been pretty good. They played really good in Dallas. That was a tough loss. They played pretty good versus a really good Carolina team the other night. So I'm not too worried about them. And I'm not too worried about McDavid. He's got 6 points last 4. Feels like he's getting going. And I actually think there's value backing him to get 2 points in this matchup at minus 140. I'm willing to lay that. You look at if you're someone who wants to buy into the narrative that he gets a little extra juice in the tank playing Crosby, that, and like you talked about how Edmonton has just absolutely crushed Pittsburgh. Well, McDavid's been a big part of that. He has 17 points in those 6 games. So he has been completely roasting these guys.
It's like you're playing in front of your dad, right? You got to perform.
Yeah. And then the other part that hasn't hurt is, and obviously doesn't hurt this year, is that whole time Pittsburgh's been fairly below average defensively and has not defended the rush well at all. So I think it's not surprising just from a matchup standpoint that it's worked out pretty good for McDavid. And then maybe if you want to keep in mind that he's probably a little extra up for these games versus Crosby, that doesn't hurt either. And then, you look at it this season, Pittsburgh's been even worse defensively. They're giving up 4.25 goals per game. I believe goals against per game, I think was the number. So high total tonight. Oilers are a huge favorite. I'm actually willing to lay that with McDavid. I think he's going to have
What is the price? Sorry.
It's at minus 140. I wouldn't hate.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at what's out there for 3 points either, but I wouldn't hate that one bit because I feel like this is a really good spot to bet on McDavid. He hasn't been quite producing, at the rate we're like expecting. And I think Pittsburgh can just continue to be one of the worst teams in the league. He's plus 220 for 3 points. So I wouldn't hate sprinkling on that either.
Yeah. Penguins right now currently rank as the 4th worst team behind the Ducks, Red Wings, and Canadians in shots against per 60 minutes, basically 33 shots per game right now in all situations for the Penguins, according to Evolving Hockey. And just circling back to Matthias Ekholm for a second, he has registered at least 3 shots in 4 out of the 7 games this season, but he's done it every time that Edmonton has been a big home favorite. So against Chicago, Calgary, and Philly. And I kind of think that the Pittsburgh Penguins are in that group as well. So hopefully Edmonton will be generating sort of the same kind of offense that they did against those teams, at least from a shot perspective tonight. And yeah, so I like that bet. But let's spend, I don't know, 5 minutes or so just looking into Saturday's action. Of course, we already talked about the Washington Capitals. One thing I didn't note was that Washington actually has 2 days off heading into Saturday's game against Tampa Bay, who will have only had 1 day off, so a bit of a rest mismatch for the Capitals. Some of the other rest mismatches on Saturday, on Friday, of course, the Islanders have had 2 days off against the Devils, who played on Thursday. But then on Saturday, we've got Buffalo with 3 days off versus Detroit on 1 day off. The Flyers have a slight rest advantage over the Wild, but it looks like Travis Konechny is going to be out of action for that game, possibly. So that's a big blow to Philly there. And we also have the Ducks with a 2 day rest advantage, 3 days rest against the Rangers, who have only been off for 1 day, but they probably need a lot more than that to get a win over the Rangers. Columbus is going to have a 3 day rest advantage over the Preds on the second half of a back-to-back on Saturday. Same with the Canucks against the Penguins. And San Jose will be taking on the Golden Knights on their second half of a back-to-back. So we already talked about the Capitals and the Lightning and why we liked Washington at plus 148 all the way down to plus 130. What game do you want to zero in on here for Saturday, Nick?
Let's zero in on the Columbus Blue Jackets in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
You know that I told you this was a spot I was watching for. You talked about how it's a rest advantage with the Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets already there, ready to go. Nashville's playing tonight in Chicago. I think that the Blue Jackets, and I'd kind of had this hunch before that Leafs game, had competed a lot more respectably than their record showed. I thought a lot of those games, they were pretty, they beat Colorado, and I thought the Panthers game, they're really good. They lost the Wild twice, but both games were quite competitive, and we've seen that Minnie is actually quite good. So they've had a fairly tough schedule, and I think they've played a pretty solid, fundamentally respectable brand of hockey. So I think you're looking at a traveling back-to-back for Nashville here, and the number right now, FanDuel's at plus 210 on the Blue Jackets to win this game. I think that's not a bad number at all. It's not going to be pretty. Obviously, like you like to point out, a bet that's going to lose more often than it's going to win. But I think that number is just way too long. Columbus has competed respectably. We know how tight this league is. The Preds have had their share of flaws. I was happy they got us that win when we bet them on Tuesday, but I'm still not convinced that this is a team that entered the year being priced properly. And I think they're just a little too favored in that spot tomorrow. So I feel pretty decent taking on the Blue Jackets at that kind of number. I think it's going to be, a reasonably competitive game. I wouldn't hate it as a spot to sprinkle on them, maybe winning in regulation or winning by 2, even if those numbers are quite long, maybe in the plus 330 range for regulation. We'll see. But I think that it's definitely a good spot to take on the Blue Jackets as that heavy of a favorite.
Yeah, and speaking of the Minnesota Wild, I wasn't sure about this one before the show, but then as we were going live, the news about Konechny probably being considered questionable heading into Saturday's game against the Wild came out, and now I've got some interest in Minnesota. It has moved a little bit. There was some minus 123 out there. Sports Interaction, though, minus 130 on the Wild. I think that's a good price. I mean, this Flyers team is obviously going to have a hard time scoring goals, especially so without Konechny in the lineup, if that's the case. And I think that's a pretty reasonable price to back the Wild, considering how good they looked, and considering that we'll probably see Phil Gustafsson back in the crease for Minnesota as well. Samuel Urson confirmed to start, so it's not going to be a Fedotov start, unfortunately, but I like the Wild's chances at minus 130.
Yeah, I thought Fedotov got it kind of harsh. The TV broadcast was giving him his calls or his flowers at the end of the game versus the Caps. I thought he was fine. The Dowd goal kind of sucked, but he actually made a lot of really good saves to make up for it. I think he kind of just, this is going to work to your point. The Flyers just left him out to dry. So
yeah,
I thought Philly would be more competitive than this. This looks like one of these spots where I'm a little afraid, but at the same time, I couldn't believe how short this number opened. Like, I kind of was thinking this would be a spot where I might bet Philly on the merit that I could have seen this opening like plus 140.
Yeah.
So I was just way off on that.
I was
So
expecting that as well.
yeah. So obviously it's just like, it feels like a spot where you're expecting some kind of pushback from the Flyers, and maybe, the Wild could be due for a bit of a letdown here. And I don't want to say playing above their heads, because I really like a lot of what they're doing. They're doing a lot of really good, like, it actually feels like this is a team that came into the year and philosophically made some changes. Like, they're really working hard to possess the puck. I feel like they're doing a good job of like ragging it, finding plays, and actually look like a team it's not just like they've come out here and ran pretty good, gotten good goaltending. I think they're doing a lot of things really well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to see that you do like the Wild here, when this number looked like we thought it would open way, way away from this.
And I think we both liked the Florida Panthers, but this one has moved a bit and basically has kind of we've seen all the value, and at least in my opinion, all the value in this one sort of disappear. So the Panthers were available at minus 116, which I thought would be a reasonable price without Alexander Barkov, but there's a good chance that he'll be making his return to the lineup this weekend. So minus 116 was probably short, but Florida has since moved up to minus 128. That is currently the best price in market. Still probably a little bit of value there, given that they are facing off against the Islanders in the second half of a back-to-back, but I don't think I'm going to reach on this one. I think I'm okay with the Capitals and the Wild. One underdog and one favorite for Saturday, at least right now.
Yeah, I like it. The other one that I'm kind of interested in is actually the Sabres. I feel like their layoff's almost at the point where maybe, and you'd probably have more of an opinion on this based off the data, but it's probably getting to the point where it becomes a little concerning. I think they're at,
they're at 3 days. That's the sweet spot.
Okay, so it's not as long as I thought it'd been.
Yeah.
And I just feel like Detroit, you look at what they've done, like, it almost makes me irrationally afraid. Yeah. And I mean, I lucked into winning a bet on them versus Islanders, but this team's been outshot. I think it's like 43.
Didn't they have 11 shots in that entire game?
Yeah, and then last night they like, two of their goals were full breakdowns. Legit goals would have been a goal on any goalie. But with that said, I think the Devils easily could have had like 6 on another night, and you can just see the flaws among this roster. And I kind of like the way Buffalo's trending. Like, they've had a relatively tough schedule. They've had some losses where I thought they played reasonably well. And they enter off a really good game versus the Stars. So I think there's a bit of a case to be made for the Sabres tomorrow. Or if anything, even I think circling in on some of their top players to have productive days in the prop markets. Even if you just want to keep it simple and go with Thompson over 3.5 shots, I think that could be something that ends up at a playable number if it's around even money. But yeah, it just feels like Detroit's going to be a team you want to keep fading in those markets. Like, I just don't think they have the bodies to own much of the play. They're always
it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't.
Oh, and they are like, they have some really talented scorers. Like, DeBrincat.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
He scores a goal completely against the run of play last night, and that would have been a goal on any goalie. Just like, great shot. And you're going to have to be careful not to make mistakes versus Detroit, but it feels like that's always going to be their recipe for trying to win games, is just like hanging on and hoping they can get something against the run of play. And that just, it seems like that's not going to work over a large sample. We saw the same thing last year. I remember down the stretch, and they have so many fans. Like, if you say bad stuff about Detroit, you're going to get some DMs. You fade them and like they win the game. People will let you know about it. And I've been in that boat, but there was a lot of games down the stretch last year where I was fading Detroit, and like, when it wouldn't go my way, I'd be like, oh God, here we go. But I think they're kind of settling in that same rhythm already. Like, this 3-game win streak is just, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel good about them. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah. No, the Red Wings right now, I mean, nobody outperformed expected goals more than Detroit last season, according to Evolving Hockey. And this season, they're not outperforming expected goals, at least on offense. At 5-on-5, they have generated 1.99 expected goals per 60 minutes. They've scored 1.94 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes. But on defense, they have allowed 2.77 expected goals per 60, but have actually just allowed 1.77 goals per 60 minutes. So they are, saving their goaltenders are saving, and mostly Alex Lyon right now. He's been unreal. I mean, I think last I looked, he had saved the team like 7 goals above expected. The best he's ever done in an entire season, I think, is 11. So he's already, he's already well on his way to having a career year. Whether he can sustain it or not, I don't know. But Detroit currently ranks 31st in expected goals percentage at 5-on-5 at under 42%. Only the Canadians have been worse. And I believe they rank second worst in all of those categories: shot attempt percentage, unblocked shot attempt percentage, even shots on goal. But somehow the Red Wings have a 52.4% goal share at 5-on-5. So
no one really thought they'd have this good of, like, goaltending's hard to predict, and they did go into it with 5 options. So, like, there was even more ridiculous, but no one was counting on this team getting excellent goaltending. So even one of their biggest strengths is, like, debatable for sure.
I think people were thinking, like, hey, if this team, they can maybe be a playoff team if they, like, outperform offensively like they did last year again. But there's no way they're going to do it if they have to rely on their goaltending. And so far, it's been the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the fun part about goaltending. Just always cop out and say no one really knows anything, but it does feel like they're a lot of what's going. They kind of remind me a little bit of Buffalo entering last year, where, like, they had a pretty good season last year. They outscored expectations, and then they kind of entered this year being the year that people thought they might really break into the playoffs. And I mean, who knows? Right now they're 4th in the Atlantic and they're ahead of some good teams, but yeah, it's hard to say if that's going to be sustainable.
All right, man. Well, appreciate you joining the show today. Good luck with your bets tonight and this weekend, and we will see you on Monday.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll see you then. Good luck this weekend.
All right, thanks. Good luck with your bets, boys and girls.